project is called Between the Lines, and it is a series of art workshops by correspondents with LGBTQ identified folks who are incarcerated in Florida. My father was incarcerated and convicted in 2008 and then died in prison in 2011. What he was charged for a sex crime against a boy, and there was definitely an impact of particularly the intersection of homophobia and misogyny in his case and how it was handled and what the state's narrative of justice looked like. The proposal to We Women and Between the Lines came about as a way to link the personal story to advocacy and kind of a wider frame on how criminalization has affected LGBTQ people, especially in the South in the United States, where there's a pretty there's both a legacy of Jim Crow laws and the racist policing, but there are intersections within that with gender and sexuality. I'm in a unique position to be able to think both how the criminal justice system affected my family from the perspective of being the child of someone who was accused and convicted of a crime, and also as a victim of a crime that was never adjudicated, and also as a member of the queer community who has seen the impact of policing and laws affect people within my community. And I think that's a very interesting intersection, particularly at the intersection of people who have been incarcerated or convicted of crimes and victims. Often I think those two groups don't touch a whole lot, and often their interests are seen as very separate. And I feel like I'm interested in talking about how the criminal justice system fails to create accountability for everybody within the system. And my personal experiences give me, I think, the ability to navigate those different spheres. In our culture, there's a lot of fear and narratives of monstrosity around people who are convicted of crimes, especially if that crime is violent, that somehow these people, you could only do that if you're not human anymore or something. And I think that is a really dangerous narrative and simply not true. That I think, we all, our culture is violent and produces violence sometimes systemically. And I think more compassion and nuance around understanding people who have done harmful things in their life, and seeing them as full people, and their humanity and their that they are so much more than whatever their conviction is, and maybe a moment where they did something that was harmful and had a substantial impact on someone else. And I think there's more possibility for accountability in those kinds of conversations where you're not just punishing somebody for something they did in their past, but giving them opportunities to grow and to see their own potential and their own power and empower them and foster creativity and just create more options than this kind of cycle of violence. Originally, Between the Lines was going to be in-person art workshops with people at high risk or formerly incarcerated people in Florida. And that was because I was always interested in working with people inside of prisons and jails, but COVID happened. The restrictions on travel and in-person teaching made me totally rethink the project and opened up this possibility of doing a workshop via correspondence. And that had always existed, but I think even before COVID, but became more urgent in the post-COVID context because most prisons had suspended visitation for people incarcerated, and so there was much less, or had put them on like 24/7 lockdowns, meaning like they were in solitary confinement all the time. The communication is not just about the workshop. It's about so much more than that. It's about like getting to know these people. There's like a flow both ways. I've been asked to do things for people, things like calling the commissary to see about money that they didn't, like a certain person didn't get when they were transferred from one prison to another. Advocacy support, like writing a letter of recommendation for a compassionate release case, stuff like that. So I feel like there is like a back and forth, and like people are sharing details about their lives, and I share a little bit about mine. And I feel like that is kind of what the engagement has become, or what community engagement is been maybe under the model of direct aid, or what direct aid looks like, and what collaboration could be with people who are currently in prison, especially considering that there's a big like power imbalance between people on the outside and people on the inside, and how do you navigate those things in a way that's not exploitative and that supports some of the needs and interests of the people who are participating. My goals would be to help make connections between people on the inside to people on the outside, or like bridge the gap that like prison walls create, where like people are removed from society and put away somewhere where they're not meant or supposed to be by design to be seen or heard or interact with the rest of society. And there is, I think, something very powerful and about restoring those connections. It is difficult to maintain contact with people in prison. Even though letters get through, they're very regulated. Everything's read and potentially censored. Stuff has been sent back to me. You know, like the paper has to be white, the envelope has to be white. It can't be on certain like other kinds of paper. You can't send original artwork. Like books that I've sent from like verified suppliers like Amazon, like if have been rejected or held in the mailroom for months. There's like a delay, and then there's like the cost of mail as well. So it's not easy, and those, I think, connections, I think, help people on the outside who, especially those who don't know a whole lot about the prison system, or maybe have not been personally impacted by it, for them to kind of see what the system does, and like how, especially in Black and Brown communities where over incarceration, over policing is such an issue, how like that scale, how it like fundamentally alters like the shape of communities and families, because so many people have been removed from them. And I guess so, and like maybe building on this concept of direct aid as something that we can do as individuals to kind of change the system. And I guess what that means is just giving direct support to people in prison, in terms of emotional support, as like letters, or being an advocate for some of like their daily needs, like there's a hold on their account, or sending them stamps, or sometimes money. That can be life-changing to people in prison, especially those that like don't have family support. I think as a non-binary person, I think I'm really sensitive to how the legal system kind of shapes my existence, in both good and bad ways. For example, like in New York, and in New York City, I can get an X gender marker on my New York City ID. You can't do that in Florida. um, um, yeah. So like, and in New York courts where I got my name changed, there was really no question about wanting to change my first and last name, which I did at the same time for different reasons. In Florida, I would have to meet Florida standards for a legal name change, and those standards are different. And like there would have been more documentation needed to do it in Florida. So things like that, where I know that um, uh, like legal recognition and the law, um, on the one hand, can open up possibilities for existing, but they also for non-binary people like me, and like legitimize like our presence or our civil rights in society, what rights we have. But at the same time, the law um, is is rooted in the system of punishment as well, and um, that is kind of invested in taking away people's rights. Um, and I don't know, I guess that like navigation between who gets to have rights and whose rights are protected under the law seems very nuanced and like relevant to me as a non-binary person.